Hey guys, welcome back to What the Fat. This is your host, Dr. Ryan Lowery, coming to you on Thursday, bringing you a topic that has been really highly debated, gotten a lot of attention in the keto community. Um, I guess because it's a sensitive topic on multiple fronts. And that is there was a top, and I put the top in quotations, rated vegan cardiologist that came out and said that no one should be doing a ketogenic diet, that eating ketogenic makes you die faster. And then not only that, he started beating down on red meat and then eggs. And that's where I kind of completely lost it. So I just want to address some of those points because I want to make sure, I want to clarify my point and use this podcast as an opportunity to do so. So that way you guys get more perspective. But if you haven't seen our response to this, I encourage you guys go to Ketogenic Com on YouTube. I did this whole video. We put together this entire video basically showing his points and then sort of the reaction and the frustration with some of his thoughts. And I'll say thoughts because there wasn't really any science to back up any of his claims. So let me start there. So this vegan cardiologist came out. He put out an article. He put out a video. For those of you who don't know, basically put out this video saying that he had problems with red meat, and he actually does bring in some citations. And the one thing I want to talk about is he talks about some of these citations published in a very popular journal, The Lancet. And I have nothing wrong with The Lancet. The Lancet's actually a really great journal. They publish high quality work. But the problem is when people take research and take it out of context. That's the problem. And so what this study found basically was that people who tended to eat more meat tended to die faster. And for those of you who are listening to the podcast, you probably already know where I'm going with this. Correlation does not equal causation. That study, the only thing it tells us is there's a correlation between people who tend to eat more meat and those people who tend to die faster. And so what's the limitation with that? Well, those people who tended to eat more meat could have also been smoking more, could have also had higher incidence of diabetes, could have also been eating Big Macs from McDonald's and washing it down with a large Coke. But the fact that they tended to eat more meat than their counterparts and they died faster, they're contributing or correlating high meat consumption to faster rates of death. And so that's the problem with correlational research, is that we need to take it in context. Can it provide some degree of insight? Certainly. I think for some instances, it can provide some degree of insight, no doubt. But when we take things out of context, we say just because people who tend to eat more meat tended to die faster, and then say eating red meat causes cancer and for people to die faster, that's just factually it's incorrect. Scientifically, that is incorrect. And so we're taking the study and taking it out of context, and that's something that should never be done. And so what we did in the YouTube video, even in the description, I provided like 10 different other studies that were correlational that showed the complete opposite, right? People that tend to eat higher degrees of meat not having any cardiovascular disease or any problems. So like you can make the point counterpoint for any one of these scenarios utilizing correlational research because it's so broad. But there's been no randomized controlled trial that have literally taken people, fed them meat, and found that they died faster. That just hasn't been shown. What I will say is this: I'll give a little credit here in saying that processed meats, eating them consistently over and over and over again, probably isn't ideal. And so that's one of the things that I think that I'd agree with. That some of the research and data with some of the things that are inside of these highly processed meats, if you're having them as a primary point or a primary piece of your entire diet every single day, that likely will have negative effects. However, having like grass-fed and grass-finished beef, or grass-fed and grass-finished any type of meat, chicken, any types of these things, that there's no data indicating that that's bad. when taken in context of a whole foods diet. And that's one of the first points. And I understand that there's doctors, there's people who are vegetarians or vegans that may advocate for that, but just don't make the point that's scientifically incorrect. And the next point where he came out and he basically goes that eggs, he goes the people that consumed eggs had higher incidence of cancer and death. And he goes, the reason that the eggs weren't statistically significant were because people likely got cancer, and people that have cancer don't get cardiovascular disease. And that like blew my mind because he's making this inference that having eggs, consuming eggs, causes people to have cancer. Like that was the inference he was clearly trying to indicate in this interview. And there has been no data, zero data, coming anywhere close saying that consumption of eggs would have any effect, any type of effect on developments of cancer. Like to me, I look at that from a cardiologist who's clearly got degrees and has went to school for a long period of time. Like there should be some level of accountability for this individual. Like I would look at it, people call it malpractice for doctors recommending the negative things or bad things that ultimately lead to people having negative health outcomes or actually hurting them. To say that eggs have any impact on cancer, and if he's advocating that to his patients, I warrant that has like he should be held accountable for that. Like that to me is some sense of malpractice. Like that's absolutely effing insane for someone to claim when there's zero data for that. And you look at all of the benefits of eggs. Like you talk about, it's high. It's one of the most nutrient dense foods. Some people call it a superfood, right? It's got fat, it's got protein, it's got B vitamins, it's got all these different types of minerals and vitamins inside of it. It's got choline, which is extremely important for like brain health. It has lutein, which is important for eye health. Study after study after study has shown that it increases HDL cholesterol. It turns small, dense LDL into larger LDL, so it's increasing particle size for LDL, which is a good thing for overall cholesterol and overall health. I mean, it's causing people to eat less. Like when you change your breakfast out, there's studies that have been shown when you like eat eggs instead of eating grains and fruits and all these different cereals and sugary rich foods for breakfast, you're eating less throughout the remainder of the day. Like the amount of data on eggs and their potential benefit is mind blowing to me. And the fact that someone would come out and say, oh, these cause cancer and some type of scare tactic for people, that rubs me the wrong way. And I want people to understand that are listening to this podcast, because there will be people that are listening to this that are vegetarian and vegans. Trust me, I'm not one of those individuals. I'm not fully carnivore. I'm not fully vegan. Like I'm not one of these people that's going to berate and belittle and say vegans are dumb or vegetarians are idiots. Absolutely not. Like if that's your choice and you choose to do that, that's completely fine. I have no problem with it. It's the same reason why people that don't have the same religion as me, I'm completely fine. We're friends. Like I'll hang out with people who may not believe in the same things that I believe in. It's okay to live in that type of world. But don't come to the table on one end and try and put other people down. That's when I have a problem. Don't try and scare people with incorrect information just because you're trying to push your point of view. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to clarify is I have absolutely nothing against vegans or vegetarians. If that's the lifestyle that you choose to do, kudos to you. I highly recommend you check out and you're making sure you're supplementing with important amino acids and getting in high quality foods. Heck, I just had a good friend of mine, Dr. Will Cole, on the podcast talking about his brand new book, The Ketotarian, which is a mostly plant-based approach. And I didn't ask him this, but I bet you he would agree that there's no negative data on having eggs that would have any kind of contribution to cancer. Or even we talked a little bit about red meat. Like he's not completely against people eating meat, he had some reservations, and I suggest you go check out that podcast. But he had some reservations with people going fully carnivore, especially for the gut bacteria aspect, but wasn't like people who eat meat are stupid or people who eat meat are going to die of cancer. Like, he's very scientific in his approach, and I'm fully supportive of that. And so that's one of the only conundrums I have is when people on both sides, even carnivore people that like belittle or put down people who are vegetarians or vegans, like I have problems with those people too. In the same token, I have problems with a vegan or a vegetarian, especially when they're a doctor and they're responsible for patients and people look up to these individuals. I don't take that lightly. Like, people are looking up to you for guidance, for information, for trustworthy advice, and you're putting down people who eat meat, not only people who eat meat, people who eat eggs, and saying that it causes cancer. Like, that frustrates me, and that's what's scary. And I really wanted to clarify that because there's absolutely no evidence for that whatsoever. One of the things I forgot to mention was I don't know much about the topic. I'd actually love to have on the podcast, I'd love to bring someone on who really knows a lot about farming and knows a lot about people who choose to be vegetarian or vegan for animal cruelty purposes. Like, I don't know much about it. I would love to learn more and be more informed myself, because obviously I love animals as well. I have a dog. He's my life. He's my love. But Ted Nugent, I believe, was the individual who was on Joe Rogan and brought up a really interesting point about it. And I believe what his point was, and hopefully someone can come on and explain this further. Maybe if I can get Ted on, that would be amazing. But his point was this: a lot of times we look at cows, we look at chickens, and via propaganda or via media outlets, like, it makes it look like these animals are very inhumanely treated. And maybe that's the case. Maybe in some instances, like, I've seen some of these chicken coops and they're absolutely terrible. But I don't believe in my heart of hearts, and I have to do more research on this. I'm admitting I don't know much about this, but I have to believe in my heart of hearts, like, there are several suppliers of some of these meat sources that aren't doing what some of these propaganda or some of these media outlets are portraying of some of the conditions that these animals live in. But in general, Ted brought up a really good point. If your aspect is about all animals, you wouldn't believe the amount of reptiles, insects that are killed harvesting plants, like creating tofu and things like that. Like, think about all these critters that are on these plants, and then when they go and farm them, they just don't jump off and go run off into the forest. No, they're killed, and they're mixed in with that. And so that's one of the things I'd advocate people to look into further, because, yeah, like, a cow is cute and cuddly and chickens are cute, but, like, if you're truly all about looking at animals and looking at all these different things all as one being, like, you wouldn't believe the amount that are killed in the farming and harvesting of plants. And so a lot of times people get wrapped up in it, and I know there's a ton of people who are advocating this, sometimes to a little bit of an extreme, but they're trying to get their point across. But like, Shawn Baker is one of the people who I've seen post a lot about this. And it's interesting to me. I'm never gonna go fully one side or the other. I'm just intrigued by all these different aspects. Like, I'm intrigued by different religions. I'm intrigued by different political views. I'm intrigued by different nutritional choices. I'm a very open individual. I think that's one of the things that makes me strong as a scientist, is I'm never locked into one certain point of view. But for me, that was a really eye-opening and insightful thing to hear from Ted, because a lot of times people do talk about being humane to animals, and I was like, wow, so basically, if people are doing that, and if this is legitimately true, you're valuing a cow's life over some of these other reptiles or other rabbits, for instance, that are in the field that just get run over by tractors or killed. You're valuing that animal's life more than this animal's life. So it's not just an animal, a humane thing. It's let's put a level of valuation on different animals. So if that's legitimately true, I'd love to do more research on that and have someone come on and talk about it. So if you know anyone who knows more about farming and these processes, please reach out to us, because I'm actually really interested in it, and now I'm excited about it because, uh, again, I'm just intrigued, and Ted brought up some really great points about that. But to kind of bring it back, I don't want people to think I'm against vegans or vegetarians. If that's your point for religious purposes, or you are looking out for animals, and you think that that's the way to do it, uh, completely open to that. I'm not against people who are completely carnivore and obviously on the complete end of the spectrum. Again, I fall somewhere in the middle, I would say, as far as where I practice and where I do a lot of my nutritional choices. I love Cobb salads. I also love meat. So I just encourage you guys to be very, very cautious, because this cardiologist, this type of propaganda isn't going to be the last of it, and it certainly isn't the first, and it's certainly not going to be the last. And we're going to continue seeing this, and I just hope that it doesn't ever negatively impact someone's health or confidence, in trying to embark on improving their quality of life, improving their health, because a lot of times this can get to someone and they'll go, you know what, never mind, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go back to this program or go back to this cookie cutter program. And then it leads them into this dark spiral, and people don't realize how much one small change can ultimately affect their entire life. So I caution you guys to just be careful with every single thing you read, with every single thing that you hear about. And again, going back to that episode that I talked about, find your anchors. Find those people in your life that you trust, to a point, and as long as they don't give you a reason not to trust them, use them as an anchor. Utilize them for sources of information, for resources, for advice. Those are the people that you want. And then again, be open to different ideas. So I hope that helped clarified a lot of it. I encourage you guys, go over to the YouTube channel, Ketogenic Com, and check out that YouTube video. I think there's some really interesting tidbits. And again, don't get mad, don't get angry and want to beat up the vegans, or hopefully the vegans watching it don't get mad and angry and come want to beat down my door. It's just opening up different points of view and having a discussion about it. I think that's one of the most important things we can do for not only science, but to progress humanity forward. So I appreciate you guys tuning in on this Thursday. Y'all are absolutely amazing from all over the world. Thank you so much. Remember, make positivity louder. Love y'all, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.